Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining us for another Sedaru Live here today. I've got my friend Andrew with us as well today. We're going to be talking about public works and specifically how you can use Sedaru to manage your public works department. Andrew, can you hear me okay? How are you today?
Loud and clear. Thanks for inviting me along today. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For those of you folks that haven't seen or met Andrew out there before, he is one of our Sedaru implementation experts amongst a few other hats that he's wearing, but has lots of years of experience on the asset management side, GIS side, and is responsible hands-on with getting a lot of folks out there using Sedaru. So we're going to have him do some of the driving of the software a little bit today and chime in and catch me on all the things I miss, if that works for you, Andrew.
Yep, no hats today though. Full Corona haircut.
Nice, sounds good. So, like I said, yeah, we're going to talk about public works today. Webinar should be about 30 minutes long. We got about 20-25 minutes of content, and then time built in here for you guys to ask as many questions as possible. These are always better when we get a lot of questions from folks. Make sure we're dialing into the things that you want to see and hear about. If you haven't been on a Zoom webinar before, you'll notice in your webinar interface, there's a button that says Q&A. Use that Q&A button to fire away with those questions. When you type those in there, Andrew and I will see them. And then as we're going through the presentation and talking about things, we'll get all those questions answered for you throughout the course of the 30 minutes here. If you haven't already, look for us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, your favorite social media spot. You can find us there. Lots of good content gets posted to there around more upcoming webinars, other sort of successes with customers, and just other good information that you're not going to see in other places. So certainly take a minute, pull out your phone, look for us there, and sign up to follow us there. We're doing another webinar tomorrow, all focused more on the water distribution side of looking at managing leaks and breaks, which I think will be really eye-opening for a lot of folks. So look forward to hopefully having you join us tomorrow for that as well. I always like to bring up and talk about drops and where does that fit in with what we're talking about. And drops is our strategy for how to help utilities and cities deploy technology. Because really everybody is really trying hard to get over here, right? You want to be in this spot where you're thinking about being a smart city, a smart utility. You are using all your information together to make smarter decisions, to make preemptive decisions, and to be able to really just run your system more efficiently. And that's really an end goal, but you can't start there, right? And so what we like to talk about with folks is the path on how you get there. And today, our presentation is really going to be focused mostly on this digital and real-time piece of it. And we'll kind of get into some optimizing a little bit, but really kind of focused on the left-hand side of this. And thinking about how do I take the processes that I'm doing out there that are might be paper-based, that aren't being done digitally, how do I get those digital? And then once I have them digitally, how do I use that information in real time, right? And not have a lot of lag or have lots of silos of information in there. In your travels, Andrew, I'm sure you've seen a lot of fairly gnarly paper-based workflows on the public works side, right?
Still do. It's surprising how many folks are still out there based on paper. And I think it's because of what you're saying, which is that, you know, this idea of transitioning a workflow, of becoming digital, it's pretty intimidating, especially for either end of the spectrum, for smaller utilities who might feel they don't have that expertise or resources, but also for some of the bigger utilities and enterprises too, who it's well entrenched and it's well established workflow. And it takes an act of Congress to try to shift that. So, like you said, with the drops approach, it really breaks it down into bite-sized pieces to help utilities understand that first 1 or 2 steps that you can take, get comfortable, and then take the next couple of steps.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad to see that you've migrated from saying an act of parliament to an act of Congress. You know?
Yeah, well, I'm a citizen now.
So if what I've got up on the screen here now is what we call Sedaru Omni. And Omni is the application where you're going to see all this information come together in one place. Across the top, you have what we call performance tiles, and are really can be used to do a couple things. One, they can be used to define and manage and measure your key performance indicators that you use to run your city. They also can be used as a window into real-time data sources, and really to essentially kind of query almost any back-end database and to see results from it, but to put it into something that's easy for folks to use. And you'll hear us mention this a couple times over the next 20 minutes, that the ease of use is really important. If you are thinking about how am I going to get technology deployed out to the field in my organization, and make no bones about it, if you're talking about public works, a huge piece of any of your public works management happens in the field, right? And so you have to have technology that your field staff is going to be able to use and work with really easily. You'll notice that the map is really centered to everything that we're doing here in Omni. And so it's really, Sedaru's built off of your GIS. And so what I'm looking at here is actually a tie-in directly into my GIS. So I just clicked on a tree, for example, and I can see information about that particular tree right from here. I can go to a particular segment of street and I can see information about that street that's in there. And so it's designed and built off of Esri infrastructure to take all the existing work that you've done in your GIS and to be able to display it and work with it and have it from here. The data set that you're looking at here from a city here is pretty comprehensive, right? And you very well might have no trees in your GIS, or you've got different ways that this looks and different symbology, et cetera. And all of that just gets inherited into Omni. And so I think it's important to mention that you can start using Omni for public works really wherever your GIS data is at today. It certainly doesn't need to be perfect. I mean, Andrew, how many perfect sets of GIS data are out there at cities?
Right. I know some people who think they may have one, and I don't want to upset them, but the opposite is more often true. And like you said, I've seen too many utilities, whether it be the GIS folks there or the public works field personnel, not want to take that first step because my data is not perfect. And if I put it out there for people to start working against, they're going to see all kinds of holes in it. Well, guess what? That's a good thing, right? Because once they're exposed, we can understand those. We can use workflows like we're going to see here within Sedaru in order to start filling in those blanks, and then in order to start being able to become much more proactive about assets that we now know we have out there.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And you bring up a good term there in terms of assets, right? So Sedaru is an asset-centric work management system, in and amongst all the other things that it does, meaning that when I assign tasks or activities or items that need to be completed, those are all assigned against assets. And the assets here, for example, and again, assets can be anything you want to define essentially, but you see here, I've got manholes, I've got pipe, I've got catch basins, I've got inlet, outlet sort of work stuff, other stormwater pieces, I've got sidewalks, I've got signs, trees, all of those sort of things, really. So you can really, like I said, define any asset you want. I could have park benches in here, and I could go to really almost any level that I want. And one of the great things with that too is that you're with a lot of the sort of the Esri templates that are out there as well too. They're going to have a lot of the most common things you're going to track that's already going to be predefined for you. And so any work that you've already done there to kind of build up any of those data sets, Sedaru is going to be able to use it really easily there. So let me show you a quick example here in terms of how I could kind of assign and do some work, and then I'm going to kind of throw it to Andrew to kind of show you how that works in the field, and then we're going to come back into Omni, and I'm going to show you what the results of things can look like here. So if I wanted to, for example, do some inspections of signs, for example, and you see here I've got these signs in here. I just clicked on one. I've got another over here. So I could click on an asset really simply and then hit the little working symbol here and say, I want to do a sign repair task. Now you see there's just one example of a work order type in here. I can have a big long list of all kinds of different things, right? I could be doing sign inspections, obviously repairs. I could have different variations of inspections. All of that's customizable in terms of what types of work you're going to have in there. You can configure all of those pieces and have really as many different types as you want. In addition to kind of just selecting things on a one-off basis, I can also just draw a box around things. I could come in here. I'm just going to draw a little box here. I'm going to grab all these signs that are in my little window here.
I'm getting nervous now. Does that mean that's all going to get assigned to me?
Exactly. That's where this is headed. So you see here, I grabbed signs, I grabbed streets, sidewalks, etc. But I'm just going to do work assignments here for the signs. I could deselect these things if I wanted to kind of clean stuff up a little bit too, just so you don't get as nervous. I want to keep you sane on me here. But we'll go here and I'll just say I'm going to do those sign repairs. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to assign them to Andrew. I could assign it to multiple people if I wanted to also, but we'll just do it to Andrew. And then if I was assigning work that was driven specifically by customer requests and those sorts of things, I can have that. I can populate that information in there as well too. And again, there's a bunch of ways to get into that. But a lot of public works driven tasks tend to be customer oriented things also. So you can include that information right from there. And then I can just say create work order, right? So really the idea here is how do I, as simply as possible, right? So for my foremen and my supervisors and those folks, be able to use a web-based tool like Omni and to just quickly be able to assign a lot of those tasks and pieces there. And it's really that simple. And there's a couple other ways too, and I'll show you when we come back into Omni some other ways that I can sort of select assets and assign some work. But let's take a look at the field application.
All right, good. So we're going to use Field Force on my iPad here, but we can use this on any Windows devices if that's what you use out there in the field. And so, of course, it's fully touch-centric, touch-capable. Or in fact, I'm using a mouse with my iPad here just so you can sort of track where I'm touching and track where I'm seeing. But like Adam hinted at earlier, this is really designed for use in the field by field personnel. And so one of the big drivers behind Field Force is to make it as easy as possible to use out there. Make it safe when you're standing in the middle of the street. So you're not frustrated. You're not clicking extra buttons and wrestling with this iPad while traffic is whizzing around you either side of you. So to that end, we sort of mimic the design that you saw on Omni, but there's some functionality and intent behind that, which is that right now you can see I have this street signs tile highlighted, which means that that's actually the only asset that I can select, so that I don't end up selecting something that I don't want. So right now I can touch the map, and I can pick up street signs, but I'm not accidentally picking up trees, or I'm not accidentally picking up sidewalks.
So it's designed for guys with the big hands, right, that aren't necessarily...
Yeah, we hear that way too much. I can't change my workflow to use an iPad. I've got fat fingers. Well, I'd be amazed at the amount of personnel that I've worked with who started off with that, but after a few hours, they're showing me photos on their iPhone of their grandson or their kid's graduation. You know how to use a device like this, and it's pretty intuitive. So all we're doing is building on that same idea, right? So now if I want to go and want to pick up some trees, I can select my trees tile, and now I can go and I can select trees. And now I in fact cannot get street signs because, like I said, I've chosen the trees tile. More importantly, you'll see that I got a couple of numbers under my street signs and my trees tile. And depending on which one I pick, I get a list of things to do. Where do you want me to start first, Adam? Trees?
Let's do trees. Let's do trees.
Okay, I got to do the trees. It's a nice day. I should do them. You can see that I get given a list. And like you saw Adam do in Omni, he selected a bunch of assets and he just, with a single click, assigned all of those work orders out, in this case, tree inspections. Now, if he's assigned these work orders out to more than just me, to me and some other colleagues, they're going to see these same 6 too, until any one of us start to work through this list. And then as each of us complete them, then that number is going to drop in real time. So I'm not going to go and do the same work that somebody else is. I'm going to know in real time that somebody else has done one of these tree work orders. And now there's only 5 things to do, and my list is going to update in real time. But kind of get the feeling I'm the only person working today, so I'd better get on with it. You can see that as soon as I hit one of the items on the list, it takes me to where I need to be, the asset in question, in this case a tree, and it presents information about that asset. And this is totally configurable. So this can be whatever you have in your GIS, or this could be pulled from previous inspections against that asset, or a combination of the two. So you can see here, we've got an ID, we've got an address, we've got a species and all that kind of thing. We could have information in here about last time it was visited, and some information recorded.
And what I love about this, and I encourage people to think about this when they're setting up their field workflows, is just put the information out there that your folks in the field need to see and to work with, right? So you might have a million fields to describe all the stuff with your trees because, you know, your arborist says we need this and we need that, and I want to know all these different things. But for somebody that's in the field just doing some of this stuff, they just need 7 pieces of information. So you configure field force so they just see what they need.
Yeah, exactly. Keep it for this initial sort of touch on an asset and see the information. I just want to see what's vital right now. We can dig into the details, but either on a historical basis or as we get into the form itself. But up front and center, there's only certain things that I want to see right now. And like you said, you don't need to clutter my display with it. Mm-hmm.
Another point, let's get this tree inspection done. Let's see what that looks like.
Well, another thing that I wanted to point out was if you have more than one option against an asset, so let's say for trees, we could have tree inspections, but maybe we have other workflows like chop the thing down or trim the branches. I don't need to waste my time digging through and picking out the correct workflow. You've asked me to do a tree inspection. Therefore, as soon as I hit that start button, it's going to take me straight to the tree inspection form. There's no fear that I'm going to perform the wrong workflow. And like I said, I don't even have to go through that extra step of clicking and picking the right workflow. So little tips and tricks like this are important to field users. And this is the feedback that we've picked up as we've worked with folks in the field. We can see here that there's information at the top there. This was requested by Adam about 15 or 20 minutes ago. So this is real time. You can see that he just assigned this to me right before this. And some of the options that we have, again, to make life easier for you in the street are simple little pick lists. Is this thing leaning? We'll say no. You know, I can have logic built in here so that maybe I don't even have to answer certain questions based on previous answers. Does it have dead branches? No, it's a healthy looking tree. What's the foliage? I don't know. Moderate. Sounds fine to me. But you can see that this is really simple, a one-finger workflow.
Well, and what's important about the pick list, right? 2 things. One, if you are doing less of this, less typing, it gets done faster. And it also certainly gets done way more accurately, right? So when I want to use this data at the end of the day to run reports and to do asset analysis and to do all those things, having pick lists built out makes all of that much, much simpler.
Exactly. Yep. And we have the ability for you to capture photos right there in the field, put numbers in here or have numbers populate based on something else, calculate based on other values that you enter further up in a workflow. But I'm done. That was, 30 seconds if I hadn't talked so much. And now I can get into to say whether I want to put my time in here, who am I, how long did I spend? I spent that long, I promise. And I can record any materials or equipment used if I had those. So if I had a truck or a chainsaw, if I was going to chop that thing down. But you can see that I've done that. And instantly, now we have an inspection against this asset. I'm able to see the history. So for the next person that comes along and wants to do some kind of workflow against this tree or against this asset in general, we can go in and we can see that history. We can see what was recorded, that this tree was healthy, that it didn't really have any problems. And we could, if we wanted, edit this existing historical record too. But it's important that users know the context. Every transactional record that's occurred against each asset is important, not just for the back office to be able to make smarter decisions around, but for me in the field too, so that I can see the health and history of this asset.
Absolutely. Let me grab there was a question here that popped up that I want to answer. That we basically said, can the system be configured? And don't leave the iPad up there for me if you don't mind, Andrew, because I want to ask you something else here after this. Can you configure the system to show different data for different assets on the individuals, like kind of roles and responsibilities need, which is a really good question. So, and there's really kind of two answers to that. So today we have it set up so that you've got sort of the office-based view of things, that I'm going to see one kind of view of data from the office, and that's, you know, super configurable. And then I'm going to have a field perspective, right, that I'm going to be able to see as well. And you can very clearly kind of define all those pieces. We're in the future, in the not too distant future, there's more granularity coming to define kind of groups and roles and responsibilities, and then within that be able to do some more granular definitions of the things that, you know, people might see, or to do some of those pieces. So that's one way to kind of tackle that. The other thing that and Andrew kind of mentioned it briefly, and I found this to be really effective for folks, is you can set up in the forms, I can set up logic within my forms so that based off of the answers to questions, I might show a different set of fields or show things in there, right? And so what I like about that is that you can keep simple things simple. And then as something gets more complicated, it can all be in there, but you don't necessarily have to worry about it being complicated until it is complicated, for, you know, if I explain that correctly. Andrew, what would I do if I was, let's say you've gone on here to look at signs, right? And I was sent out to do, you know, sign repairs, and there's a sign there that's not in my GIS and I see it in the field. How would I handle that?
Yeah, you can capture assets that you don't have. So like we said at the beginning, right, it's probably a pretty small chance that your GIS is perfect.
Right.
Anyway, even if it is right now, moving forward and maintaining it, you're going to want to capture that information as you come across it in the street, especially if it's new. So I've got my street sign selected here, like you say. I've got this little plus in the top corner here, and depending on which asset I have selected, in this case street signs, I can hit that plus and I can hit the location where we have a new street sign right here, and I can put some information in here to indicate what kind of sign it is. I can put some notes in here, and like Adam said, we can have logic around this so that it'll sort of follow that existing auto ID that you have. It'll take the next logical number, or maybe it'll preface it or end it with a certain number of words or phrases based on the sign type, or maybe where it is in your system. And again, we can sort of very quickly perform a workflow against this immediately as soon as it exists, so that we can record something against it, right? There's no point in just putting this asset in there and walking away, right? Putting this asset in here because we want to perform a workflow against it right now. So as soon as I drop that sign, I can do this sign repair, maybe I would have something in there like a sign inventory so that I could describe whatever this thing is. But yeah, very simple, very easy. And of course, right now, this is really just leveraging the location that my iPad's picking up. But we can get a lot more fine-grained around that if we Bluetooth tie into some more high-accuracy external devices.
Right. Cool. Okay, good. All right, let me show a couple things on here on my screen, and there's a few questions I want to kind of hit on here a little bit. Let's see. So let me go back, and I'm going to share my screen again here. And just so everybody, just on a time check here, we've got about 5 minutes or so. So if you've got questions, go ahead and get them in here real quick. And so let me hit a couple of these in here. So one of the questions was, data collection on assets need to be done ahead of time, or can data be added through Omni or Fieldforce, right? So good question. And that was kind of what I was having Andrew show there a little bit, showing basically the Fieldforce application can be used to collect data in the field, right? So if I notice and see things out in the field and I need to get that stuff entered, I can do that right from the Fieldforce application. Additionally, you might also think about what are other workflows that you have in place that data is being collected and going into your GIS. However you're doing that today, that can also still work, because Sedaru is designed to work with your GIS and to be able to leverage that information also. So it really is pretty GIS-centric from that perspective of being able to pull those things in here.
And just to pile on around that data collection in the field, that doesn't have to be for every asset, so it can be on a per asset type. Maybe we don't want people to collect new tree locations, just street signs. And more importantly, we could also tag that new collected asset as being just that, a new asset that's being collected in the field, so that your GIS folks can then sort of grab that and do their own research and put that into, the default or the official version, and it doesn't go straight in there.
And, a related question to that was basically saying, does the schema for data collection need to be set up ahead of time? And the answer is kind of, yeah. I mean, you need to have the containers defined for what you want to collect, and to have that set up. The good news there is that one, you've got, when working with Sedaru, we've got a library of existing forms and schema and all of those pieces that our implementation team can help guide you, and if you want, can actually set those things up for you as well too. So a lot of different ways there. But our implementation team is our GIS experts. They're water, sewer, public work experts. This is where their careers have been spent. So they tend to be able to provide a lot of guidance for all those things.
And again, just to pile on, this doesn't have to be set in stone. What we see a lot, and what I think a lot of people have realized as we've moved into this digital transition, is you don't have to get it right first time. And in fact, there's a lot of benefit to trying something, taking an off-the-shelf form, like Adam says, running with it for a couple of weeks, couple of months, and then understanding what works and what doesn't work, and then iterating on that design to refine it. But you don't have to get it right first time around. And it's not a monumental technical effort to do that iteration second or third or fourth time around.
Yep. So one of the questions here too is in terms of what would the whole workflow look like around a customer notification and some of those things, right? So one of the ways, and there's a lot of ways to tackle this, right? So we have some folks that will have Sedaru tied into their customer systems, whether that's a customer billing system, whether that's like a customer citizen request management kind of system. And so those can be integrated and automatically show up in here, which I'm not going to get into today, or I can manually do something. So here I've gone to a particular address type, and let's say it was a pothole request or repair at a particular address or area. I can come in here, choose that work type, assign it to somebody to fix it, and if there's other customer information, contact information, etc., all of those things can be put in here, and then I can hit create work order, and then that workflow is going to get picked up out in the field, kind of what Andrew was showing there. What I wanted to kind of show you also in Omni here is, in addition to kind of just looking at like open tasks, I can come in and use this to kind of query the status of various assets or various things. So you see here, I've got 7 open pothole repairs that have come in. So since April 22nd here, I've got, these various potholes, and you see those are what the little blue dots are. You see the yellow dot's going to kind of move around on the screen as I move my mouse from one spot to another. I can click right on that. I can see the information populated about that. I can hit the map, and it's going to zoom me into the location of that particular item in there, and I'm able to respond and to work and have that assigned and have that completed right from there. Now, the thing we're not doing on the Sedaru side is we're not the customer notification system, right? So we're the back-end system. We're the system that's being used by the utility to manage its work, to do all the tasks and activities. We're not going to do the customer-facing notification out there, and that's where you would integrate to any number of systems out there. There's a free template that Esri uses, and then there's a bunch of other systems out there that can be integrated to that to do that. All right, let's see. So wrapping up here, if there's any last-minute questions, let us know. I did want to show you on one other item here in Omni. In addition to looking at the map, I can kind of move over to this trend view. And the trend view is neat because it lets me, I can kind of come and see how have things been trending, right? Or how have things been completed. So here I've got this kind of general work order tile that's looking at all the work being completed on Public Works and how things have been completed. And I can kind of move into this trend view and I can keep an eye on it, right? And I can kind of see exactly on any particular day how many tasks have been done, what's been completed. And I can see all the details right here in a graph and be able to look at all that information on here. And I can create a report right from here that's going to export all that information out and be able to have as much detail as I want. So, because really, as we start thinking about that drops idea, right, that we're collecting data and we're doing it in real time, then we really want to think about, are we doing it smart, right? Are we optimizing how we're thinking about things? And that idea that within one interface, I can sort of toggle between my map and I can toggle between my historical trends, and then to do it easy enough that the average person at the utility can do it becomes really important. So just wanted to make sure that we kind of shared that information with folks. Let's see. All right, one last question that came in here. Can a work order be referenced to one another, a primary and then a separate work order for other supporting devices? Yeah, it's a good question. So there is a flavor of field force, right? So we're hitting on all the basics here, but there is an advanced field force configuration that does allow you to also manage what we call related work orders. And so what that means is I can have a work order and I can create sort of child work orders and it tied to other assets, other pieces. Your workflows get complicated at that point, or can get complicated, right? So I think to some of Andrew's points, we really encourage people start simply on some of these things, and then you can kind of grow into those complex things. But from a software technology perspective, the software completely, does support that idea of setting up related work orders from one thing to another, or having multiple assets of different types all within one work order. Really, you can kind of almost to your heart's content can configure things in a lot of different ways there. All right, well, good. Andrew, any other thoughts here you want to add?
Just what we've covered, right? Which is, if you're only just dipping your toe in the water here, it isn't as scary as you think. It doesn't have to be as big and as technologically challenging. This is a lot further along than it was even just a few years ago. Like you said, Adam, I think start small, start simple. Doesn't mean you can't get big and complicated, but it's certainly nowhere near as intimidating as it used to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll answer this one last question that came in here in terms of how does the system work with vertical assets, which is really a good question, right? So if you're thinking about water, wastewater, all those pieces, right? So if you're getting into complicated vertical assets, Sedaru does allow you to manage those. It's certainly done a little bit differently there, right? In the sense of your map becomes less important, but Sedaru gives you the ability to define a fairly complicated vertical asset hierarchy with kind of nested assets, one thing nested into the other, and that requires some different setup and really is a kind of a webinar topic all in of itself. So I think, stay tuned for a future webinar where I think we'll talk about those sort of pieces in more detail. But it also, I'll mention too that everybody that's attended today, you're going to get a follow-up email. You might get a follow-up phone call from somebody. We want to make sure we got all your questions answered and addressed. And we're happy to kind of do custom presentations for folks around this as well too, and to be able to really dig into your organization's needs and understand really what's next for you and to figure that out. So look for those emails and kind of keep firing away with those questions, and we'll get them answered. And like I said, there's another webinar tomorrow on managing leaks and breaks. And then stay tuned for upcoming webinars scheduled beyond that. Well, good. Thanks, everybody. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Stay safe, everybody out there, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.